Thank you for staying with us. The agricultural sector holds an important role in the growth and development of Nigeria and also determines the survival of its citizens. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has assured Nigerians that he will look into the agricultural sector and address issues concerning food insecurity and improve accessibility and affordability. With strategic moves in place, Nigerians will not have to pay through their noses to afford food, water, and basic amenities. Well, joining us in the studio is agricultural policy analyst Dr. Olukayode Oyeleye to discuss this. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Welcome. And from
pleasure being here.
Right. And from our Abuja studio, we have strategist, policy analyst, group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Veronica and Kemi. Good morning.
Morning. Morning. All right, let me quickly begin the conversation in the studio. If you recall, sometime in July, the president declared a state of emergency on the matter of food security in the country, and it was said to be one of the strategic measures to addressing the challenges we're facing in terms of food insecurity and food supply, to curb the prices of food, so to speak. And then again, we now saw in his speech, he talked about the matter of subsidized distribution of fertilizers and all of that, which is also part of the 15-point agreement organized labor had with government. And it is also formed part of the palliatives that we saw when the government gave some monies, about 5 billion, to state governments to addressing this matter of food security in the country. Where are we with all of the measures we are putting in place? If we are to look critically at the situation, are we on track with addressing it?
Okay, thank you very much. To begin with, this is October. Today is October 3rd. And we're basically at the period of harvest, in the year, especially in the southern part of the country, and then as you move northwards, they're still very much on the field. So as it is now, it's too early for us to talk about where we are. We can at best talk about what has been said, and then of course we look forward to the implementation and making them a reality.
All right. So with regards to the issues or the things that has been raised, are we on track at addressing this matter?
Okay, you talked about fertilizer subsidy, for instance. I think we're going a little bit backward when we go back to fertilizer subsidy policy, because right now, government should be completely out of fertilizer business. It is no longer supposed to be the business of government. All that needs to be done is to provide enabling environment for the producers, and then, of course, infrastructure that will enable those who are involved in the supply chain to be able to take them to the farmers where they are needed. Way back some 10 years ago, the farmers said they're not even so much keen about being given subsidy. Make it available. Let it get to their doorsteps. So those are the kinds of things they are talking about. So from my own point of view, subsidy is actually not a properly placed intervention when it comes to the issue of fertilizer, as an example.
All right, let's check with Mr. Ahmed and Mr. Yusuf in Abuja. So what do you think? Because this issue of, subsidy has, become kind of controversial, just as the issue of, wage increments and all that has become kind of controversial. But in terms of, the inroads of the federal government in the agricultural sector, what are you seeing as to a clear direction of what is needed to be done to drive food security?
Thank you very much for that question. But first of all, let us step back a bit and contextualize this, conversation with regards to agriculture so that we can appreciate where we are coming from, where we are, and then we can discuss way forward. Just to look at some numbers, based on the Central Bank of Nigeria in 2016, okay, we were told that in the 1960s, agricultural sector was contributing 85% foreign exchange earnings to Nigeria, 80% employment, and 90% to GDP. We all know where we are today. Recently, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, also told us that Africa currently imports about $100 billion of food that we can actually produce, valued at about 75 billion annually. Okay? And just before then, his projection as at pre-COVID-19, around 2019, Mr. Adesina projected actually that by 2025, Africa may be importing over $120 billion worth of food. We contextualize that also from the issue of food security. Today, according to Dr. Adesina, over 280 million Africans go to bed hungry. And if you bring it home to Nigeria, according to the UN-funded support statistics on food and nutrition, as at last year, the projection is that by this year, August, over 25 million Nigerians were estimated to, be critically, food insecure. Now, these projections happened before the outcome of the misstep of CBN with regards to monetary policy, the increase in global warming and all that. Looking at all the issues and also the scam that went on with the, agri-interventions by CBN and all that. Moving forward, as far as I'm concerned, with due respect to the critical steps taken by Mr. President, I call them the critical initial steps or the short term. Now he has a Federal Executive Council, we have ministers in play. There must be a formulation of what I term as agricultural sectorial reform strategy that will cover infrastructure, that will cover, first of all, fundamental is insecurity, to tackle insecurity, and then look at critical infrastructure, improving production, value addition, storage, logistics, supply chain, and all that, standardization of our process and all that. Unless we have a strategy that will cover the short to long term, the knee-jerk activities for the short term will not be sustainable, will not be impactful. Global warming or the climate change is increasing. The insecurity issue is still on ground. So while we appreciate the initial steps taken, albeit they were taken as part of the moment to deal with the issues on ground, Mr. President needs to have a robust, national agriculture, strategy, reform strategy for us to have a sure-footed progression, with regards to food security, with regards to production, supporting the production economy. Don't forget that agriculture produces food for us. Agriculture is a source of medicinal and pharmaceutical support for us. Agriculture produces over half of the raw material for the productive industry, across the value chain. So it's a critical sector. Agriculture also, if you go back to the numbers I reeled out in the 60s, has the capacity to turn around the economy of this country and move us to be less dependent on hydrocarbons. So it's a very important sector, and I hope and pray in the next couple of months, moving into 2023, we'll be clear-eyed with regards to how or where or what agriculture should be doing to our socio-economic progress as a nation.
I believe you meant 2024 because we are almost wrapping up 2023.
Yes.
Yes. But I want to take you up on a statement you made with regards to the anchor borrower scheme that was put in place by the Buhari administration to addressing some of these issues as measures. We were looking at diversifying the economy at the time, and the anchor borrower scheme came into place. You said it was a scam. Perhaps you need to expatiate on what you meant by that and the challenges you saw that made it perhaps not achieve the needed result with desire that has found us, or that has placed us where we are today as it is with regards to the agricultural sector.
Thank you very much. The current investigation that has been initiated by Mr. President, with regards to the goings on in the CBN under the leadership of Mr. Godwin Emefiele, the former governor of CBN, have started yielding some information to Nigerians. Before then, there was already an outcry, over 1 trillion naira disbursed. But there's no clear accountability with regards to that money that was disbursed. We have not seen critical impacts, apart from what I call marginal impacts. With regards to the recovery of the money, we are hearing about 40% of that money is what has been recovered so far. It remains to be seen when Mr. President opens the book of reality what I call the book of reality is the outcome of this investigation will actually tell us whether even the 40% has truly been recovered or not. We hear information about the former MD of Nitral, under investigation and all that. So these are pointers to the fact that that intervention, even though well thought out and noble, but in execution, became an issue, and that is why I call it a scam. Because the small-scale farmers that are supposed to be impacted were largely out of the loop with regards to that. And on, you can go on and on that. With regards to moving forward, I am one of the proponents that the agric intervention, such intervention programs, like I wrote in the column last week, should be removed from the focus of the CBN, so that CBN will focus on monetary and tangential fiscal policies, and let us have what I call the relevant focal point, MDAs, to focus on such interventions. I believe it is noble and it's a good thought concept, but in execution, if it is not domiciled with the right institution and run by the right people and the right processes and systems in a transparent and accountable manner, then it has become a scam. But then how we can move going forward is to restructure and realign, this critical provision for the industry, because intervention has to continue, albeit it should be done better. And that is what I mean by it is a scam. It should be done better moving forward.
All right. And back to the studio. Dr. Oyele, so what do you think? Now, you are a practitioner. This is your terrain, so to speak. And, one of the major concerns for farmers all over is the issue of access to financing. And that was where the CBN was coming from. But, of course, analysts, as Mr. Baba Yusuf, have spoken about the challenges in the system. What is your perspective in the matter? What did you observe as the problem with this kind of interventions, and how do you think government can, make more impact in this issue of financing?
Okay. Just a word or two on these anchor borrowers before I move forward. Nearly 2 years ago in this studio, I spoke specifically while the anchor borrower scheme was still on stream that it was not a good program. I did say that emphatically, and I tried to make some points about not only the suitability of the central bank in the implementation, but again the issue of when you look at the human capital component of it, and I also explained that, and then of course the people that are involved in the implementation. The truth about it is that if we want to dig deep into anchor borrower scheme, we will be bringing out quite a number of people who are even prominent in government, because a lot of politicians right now, even in the ruling party, are involved in the anchor borrowers scheme thing. So if we want to talk about it as a subject, we can take it for another day. So, but let's just walk past the anchor borrower scheme and then talk about the interest of the farmers. Now, I think there's no way we can implement any meaningful intervention when it comes to finance if we don't have database. There's a professor, Professor Peter Drucker, who said that if you can't measure it, you cannot control it. There's no way you will be able to reach out to these intended beneficiaries if you don't have a database to work with. At the very best, what you'll be doing will be guesstimate. And there will be a lot of leakages along the line, as it happened in the area of anchor borrower scheme that was actually hijacked by the politicians themselves. And so, and the truth about it now is that we need to, except perhaps what is intended is a populist program. But if it is meant to actually impact on the lives of the farmers, if you really want to turn agriculture around and target the small-scale practitioners, then of course you need to have a database. And these had to be organically generated. The subnational government will be part of this. It shouldn't be the federal government all alone. The states should buy into this. And of course, agriculture is in the concurrent list of the Constitution, and the states are actually at the center of it. So the federal government cannot carry out any meaningful agricultural intervention without carrying the state along. And then, of course, when we talk about confidence, in terms of the financial institution, it is not just money coming from the government alone that is needed to fund agriculture. If it is properly done, the financial institutions can be interested, because when they look at the numbers and they see what is going to come out, from there, they can fund small scale, they can fund medium scale, and then of course large scale farming. And we've got to a point in this country when we have to actually concentrate a lot more than ever before on large scale commercial agriculture, because that is where you really can have, and when it comes to productivity, you can deploy technology on a very large scale. And then, of course, you'll be able to get a lot more output. But that is not to say we're going to leave the small-scale farmers behind. They're very important. They're very critical to most of what we consume, especially the consumables like all the agricultural products that we use, on daily basis, like the perishables. We wanted to mention, like all these tomatoes, pepper, and all of that. They are mostly coming from the small-scale farmers. And then, of course, it could be commercialized depending on the kind of incentive that is coming to them. And then I also need to emphasize this. When we talk about intervention, the rural communities where many of these things are produced are far removed from the market. It's not necessarily in terms of distance, but in terms of road and rural infrastructure that can easily make the products to get to the market. Because ultimately, when these things are produced, a lot of them go into waste because of inability to reach the market. And then, of course, I've said it before, we should be thinking more about market information service. There's a big gap between producers and consumers. And you get to the market, what you found a week ago in terms of pricing is not what you find today. And so, this is where government actually needs to come in. So throwing money at the problem is not actually the major intervention that we need. It's actually, it's something that affects all of us here. We eat on a daily basis, except you choose to fast. And for how many days are you going to fast? So it's important then for us to look at this, holistically. And we should, we should get down to the details about how this, sector will have to be properly are structured. But I will also want to say this, that first and foremost, the age of the farmers in Nigeria, particularly even the small-scale farmers we're talking about, is advancing now. If you take an average of Nigerian farmers now, you're going to find them in the order of about 60s, because, not too many young folks really want to get into agriculture, and it should be concerning to us. And these are some of the issues that we should be looking at. And why are they not interested? It is because they don't see the incentive. There's a lot of risk involved. What are the mitigants? Are they really there to be able to help them? Are we talking about insurance, for instance? Is there any functional insurance support for agriculture? I think these are some of the issues we should be looking at. If you invest in agriculture and then maybe, like he mentioned, climate change, for instance,
yes.
Any weather event comes up and then, destroys all what you have planted. How do you get back on track? So these are the kinds of things we should be looking at. And then, of course, we should be talking about processing. And, of course, there are a lot of opportunities for agricultural processing in this country. But then the issue is, how do you aggregate even the raw materials that you are going to use? If they are produced in small quantities, on small scales, scattered here and there, how do you bring them together? That's where actually the idea of having commercial scale agriculture becomes very relevant. And so it is the policy aspect that I think the federal government should be looking at. They should go down to details. The federal government and the states, they have ministries of agriculture populated by officials that are supposed to have agricultural background, different areas of agriculture, agricultural engineering, agricultural economics, agronomy, soil science, and what have you. These are the people whose skills should be brought together. And then, of course, you look at how do you harness, their knowledge and apply to the present situation. But if we are looking at esoteric issues, you want to look at a global picture without considering the local component of it, we will continue to get things wrong. And then, like I said earlier, we'll be throwing money at a problem we don't really fully comprehend. And that gives a lot of room for misdirection of funds and for frauds and leakages and all of that, like it has happened. Like I said, if we really want to talk about anchor borrowers, I have a lot that I can say. Because when it was still operational, I was in this studio when I kicked, strongly against this anchor borrower scheme. And I said, look, this is not really the kind of program that we need to be implementing.
Now, still staying with you, Dr. Oyeleye, you mentioned so many things, and one of it was the role of state governments. In fact, so many conversations we've been having since yesterday have been talking about the role of state government and how it is that they are not particularly paying attention to what it is they are meant to do with regards to so many issues that we are facing as a country, especially at this critical time. I'll need you to perhaps expatiate on that. We recall sometime that Lagos State had lake rise with Kebbi State. We saw that collaboration at some point, and some persons benefited. We saw it was somewhat beneficial between both states, that arrangement, so to speak. People could access the rise at some point, but after a while, that went into the thin air. And I'm wondering what it is exactly, what's making states not look in the direction of trying to harness some of the potentials their state have that could be beneficial on the long run for the nation as a whole.
Okay, I'll have to talk then in the realms of politics. Politicians generally like projects that they can take journalists to, showcase them, and then we build this, we build that, and all of that, and then of course, get a lot of plaudits. It's not so with agriculture. Agriculture takes place right there in the bush, in the farm, and it doesn't look so attractive to politicians. And when we talk about short-term things, that is the way of politicians. Things that they can do, within a short time, and then make a lot of noise about and make political gains. And so that's all the more reason why this does not look attractive to many state governments. That's one thing. And then, of course, when we talk about all these, nitty-gritties, it takes a lot of attention and a lot of thinking, which again might not really be things that many politicians in office would want to get into. Unlike, I award a contract for roads. I mean, that one looks very straightforward. You can look at the figures, and then you can talk about the contractor and the time to finish and all of that. But when you talk about reaching out to farmers, someone who plants an acre of land, 10 acres, maybe 20, and at the very most, and you want to talk about them cutting across so many local governments in a state, it doesn't look so attractive. But actually, this is one of the things we should be talking about, because there are examples in in other countries, not necessarily developed, like in countries of Asia, for instance. The very backbone of their food security is small-scale farmers. India, Vietnam, and so many other places like that. Even China, that many people talk about. There are many small-scale farmers there. And of course, even there are Chinese people who are trying to promote that kind of small-scale farming that they do there, right here in Nigeria. So that shows clearly that small-scale farming is very, very important. Of course, it's central to what we do. Developed countries that people like to make reference to, there are still small-scale farmers there. So now, but the point one is trying to make is the governments at the state level actually don't see this as attractive. You mentioned lake rise. Again, I said I was going to talk in the realms of politics. If, people talk and think devoid of political consideration, yes, the kind of initiative that, was implemented between Kebbi and Lagos when it first started can be implemented again. Because I remember at that time, Saidu Dakingeri, the governor of Kebbi State, started the partnership with Governor Raji Fashola in Lagos State. They belong to different political parties. But then, of course, this issue of division of labor, or at least complementarity, came up. And so Kebbi produces the paddy, Lagos takes it up and mills and sells to the consuming public. Wonderful idea. How many more states can do this? Look beyond the political boundaries, and try to come together and think about what can we do together for the benefits of our people. And so that's the kind of a thing that I think is grossly lacking here. Otherwise, the lake rice you're talking about, is not only in the rice sector alone. Many other aspects, could easily be replicated. This could be replicated in many other aspects. The concept is actually what is more important to me. So, and, one part of the country produces this, and the other part processes it, and then takes it to the market. Wonderful idea. So those are the kinds of things I believe we should be looking at. And then of course, the politicians generally, and this is another problem, because of the followership, also, they tend not to want to, give incentives out, irrespective of your political leanings. And so when it comes to sharing or distributing the input, the incentives, if it has to do with funds or maybe some materials like inputs that we're talking about, like fertilizer and all of that, people tend to favor more of their party members for as long as this is happening. And of course, in the market, you don't know what political party the person that is selling, belongs to. It doesn't come up wherever you go. As a matter of fact, most of our daily activities, commercial activities, they are, politically blind.
Yes.
So why is it that when it comes to the issue of intervention, politics comes into play? And that's where there's a problem. And even among the politicians in the same party, there will still be camps. And so this one is a favored one. This one is, is an outsider, and all of that. So those are the kinds of things that need to be looked into. So I think for us to get it right, and given what my other colleague, from Abuja just said, when you look at the importation, I actually didn't want to start, reeling out figures, but it was good that it actually put those things in perspective. Now, if we look at the amount of money that we spend importing food, then we will get serious about producing locally. And we have a lot of things going for us in this country. Our weather is fair. And of course, for the most part, the southern part of the country has rain, every year. The northern part of the country also, even with lesser rain, has some specific types of crops that they can produce and produce very well. So, and these are some of the things we should be leveraging upon. And then even when it comes to dry season, there are many parts of the northern Nigeria where we could do dry season farming using irrigation. And so all we just need to do is policy, strategy, and their implementation. And we should think about how to get this right. And we should get very serious about it because there's a lot of pressure on us. And we can produce and export if we are really serious.
All right, let's bring in Mr. Yusuf now to this. So government after government come up with one form of intervention or the other, but to what extent do you agree with Dr. Oyeleye's submission or concerns about how much of politics we see displaying or being paramount in this government interventions here and there, and how it could threaten the larger gains of enhancing food security in the country, and how can the present administration avoid these pitfalls?
With regards to the contribution of the subnationals, i.e. the states, to improve our agri-value chain. My contribution also adding to that is to look at the critical issues now. What are the fundamentals? Issues of policy interventions can only happen when we have a sector that is existing. Agricultural sector is almost pushed, as the performance of the sector has been scaled down by almost 70%. Due to insecurity, first of all. So I think, like I said initially, we need, this current administration, led by Mr. President, has to look at an agricultural sectorial reform strategy and look at an all-encompassing, what do we need to do to now turn around this situation. I give you an example, the impact of that. First of all, GB Foods is an investor from Spain that came to Nigeria, set up shop in Kebbi. That doctor was talking about, I think he was talking about GB Foods as one of the, apart from Lagos intervention with the rice, but there's GB Foods that set up the second largest tomato processing plant in Kebbi, in Nigeria, in Kebbi. And the only fully backward integrated tomato processing plant in the West African sub-region. Over 20 billion naira investment, employing over 1,000 Nigerians. In that place. And they started production until August last year, when bandits from Niger went into that location, kidnapped some foreign expatriates and some expatriates, killed a lot of Nigerian staff there, and basically almost desecrated that location, which led to the parent company in Spain to close shop and abandon the location and lay down staff, with critical impacts on our economy. We have a lot of farmers who cannot go to farm, even for this year and last year, unless they enter into a kind of arrangement and sucking up to the blackmail of the bandits and terrorists before they go to farm. So these are issues that are fundamentals that need to be dealt with. The president has a critical role to play to provide that leadership. But then again, talking about politics, the governors at subnationals and the members of the National Assembly need to walk the talk. But you see, the citizens of this country also need to sit up and say enough with this politicking with our Commonwealth, enough with this politicking with the future of our children. I think part of the problem is the citizens are laid back and are not understanding the value they have as citizens of this country, and allow politicians to manifest this sense of entitlement and be playing politics and be playing, tough wars with critical issues like agriculture. So it is an all-encompassing thing. Citizens, especially those of us that can be able to come out and speak to government, speak truth to power while we engage. But importantly, why I still talk about Mr. President is because leadership, a pragmatic leadership from the top, is contagious. It will scale down. And if we have a national strategy that is all-encompassing, we have the National Economic Council, for example, I think we will have some progress moving forward if we have a well-articulated strategy that has the buy-in of the critical stakeholders, and we have a transparent dashboard that will drive our agricultural interventions, whether it is the financial part of it, the critical infrastructure part of it. Now, talking about policy, what is glaringly an issue is not actually lack of policies. To my mind, what is glaringly lacking is a policy gap, lack of policy coherence. There's a lot of it. Agriculture bestrides a lot of other sectors. We are talking about export, we are talking about production, we are talking about logistics and value chain. So you see a lot of interagency synergy requirement, for this sector to thrive going forward. We talk about storage and all that. This requires a lot of input from other sectors. So policy coherence, to see how policies will synergize, and not just in agriculture, in a lot of other sectors. People operate in silos, and the policies are produced or formulated from the point of view of, in sector silos, while we are supposed to have synergies and cross-pollination of policies. Then policy execution from the point of view of regulation, for example. So these are all things that we need to look at from a policy perspective, and not just to legislate and have the laws gathering dust somewhere. Critical actors within the civil service are not doing their job, or corruption is holding us back. Now, that is another big issue. A critical failure factor is the corruption part. The corruption part, the politics part is a subset of the overall corruption part of it. And so we need to look at it from a wider perspective, with a view to moving forward. And that is why I'm working from a strategic point of view, not just transactional and operational, because the strategy will be all-encompassing, including risk assessment, risk mitigations, and all that moving forward. And to see agriculture as one of the critical ways out of this economic doldrum. If we do that, and we have a table where all the critical players will come and look at this on the drawing board and create a strategy moving forward, that is the only way to go. But these knee-jerk, impulsive activities will not take us anywhere. And while the strategy is being formulated, also my advice to the governors, no state has any business being poor. We saw the model of Kebbi and the Lagos state synergy, which later on, went off the rail. Now imagine all other states coming together, either singularly or collectively, to see how they can do value innovation and create wealth from agriculture, which is cutting across different sectors. Those states will be able to also turn around their economies, because most of the time we think there's one demigod at the president, as a president that will have all the solutions. That's not the point. They have a constitutional duty at the subnationals. And I call on Nigerians to have more focal point on their governors, to task them more, so that they can also wake up and be alive to their responsibilities, not just for them to come every election cycles, get our votes, and continue, wasting our time.
All right, I'll still stay with you, Baba Yusuf. And there's this critical aspect that was mentioned earlier that I would like for you to perhaps touch on and expatiate. That has to do with climate change. We have seen how much impact and the blow it is dealing us with this aspect of agriculture. We saw, I think last year, farmlands were washed away with regards to this matter of flooding, climate change, and we also still see that very much with us as it is. What steps should the government be taking with regards to that aspect right now as we speak? Because whatever policies or framework put in place, if we have the floodings, it is another aspect that is going to deal with or make a mess of whatever the government or whatever measures the government puts in place. How do we deal with that?
Brilliant question, Veronica. You see, that is why the agricultural sectoral reform strategy is key. Because part of a critical element of a strategy document and blueprint is the risk model of it. The risk assessment and risk mitigation. Now, climate change is a key big chapter within a strategy element, a document or strategy formulation of this, getting out of this issue. And like you rightly mentioned, if that is not dealt with or eyeballed and provided for, all the progresses that we'll be making will be washed off, like the flood is washing off, the food and our houses. And that is why we must have a strategy. It is the strategy that will now enable us to be sure-footed, because we would have had direct and peripheral vision on the entire issues around our agricultural value chain, cross-sectorial dependencies and interdependencies.
What should the strategy be, if you could speak to that in specific terms?
To be specific, to be proactive. First of all, we saw what happened last year with regards to the flooding when the dams in Cameroon, the issue with the dam in Cameroon and the River Benue overflowed, and we saw what happens also that caused a havoc in Lokoja. So the early warning systems should, the critical institutions that are running our early warning systems should be alive to their responsibilities, be proactive and pragmatic, and to put measures in place to manage this crisis, because we cannot stop it. It is a phenomenon, and it's a global issue. So managing it is way to go from being proactive, from a proactive point of view. And of course, at the state levels too, to put measures in place to ensure that we all have the agricultural cycles, and we also have the medium and large scale farming that are supposed to be throughout the year. Mr. President mentioned in July that he's targeting 500,000 hectares of land production. That cannot be achieved if we don't put in place a plan, a safety plan to contain and manage, global warming or climate change, at that level. And also for the small farmers, at the subnational, is to sit down and have an early warning system, a mitigation process, and a management system for all the elements, not just flooding, with regards to climate change, including, increased heat. We saw the impact on tomato production, for example, this year, and other aspects, including the impact. Climate change also has impacted on locusts and other insects that infect the plants, or the animals. So the early warning system within the modules of the strategy will define the steps to be taken to contain the situation and to ensure there is minimal impact in the negative side on our agricultural value chain.
But do you also share the fears or the worries of Dr. Oyeleye here about the level of involvement of the youth? Because it also appears that what we see is more of maybe the youth joining farming or farming mainstream from an investment perspective and not exactly the direct involvement. Are you also worried that, a generation might just, be leaving soon, or so to speak? I don't mean that in the way I put it, really, but the fact that, a crucial generation may not just be, joining this industry head on as they should.
It's a very, very worrisome situation, to be honest, and very valid point. Part of the issue is it has become unattractive, and it started from the government making it unattractive. There is no support system for people to be, encouraged to go and join farming. Like you said, from the point of view of having the critical investment, the youth are supposed to come in with value add into the current agri-value chain. From the point of view of bringing innovation, with investment and technology and all that. Most of these things require critical investment support. Most of these require enablement, which is clearly lacking. And I totally support the advocacy to ensure that the moving away from this transactional provision. I think that is part of what Doctor is talking about. This anchor borrowers, you just come, you give people money. That is not actually, money shouldn't be the only incentive. Enablement should be the critical incentive. And to that extent, I'm moving away slightly from government, and I'm going to speak directly to the financial institutions. With due respect to the financial institutions in Nigeria, they are just sitting down behaving like Shylocks. I don't see creativity from the point of view of the finance sector in Nigeria, especially the banks. You just sit down, you look at inflation, you look at how you trigger an inflation interest rate. Most of the agri-desks in the banks have not been performing because of the policies within the banks. So there's also a need for the banks to be creative from that point of view, from a survival perspective, because this issue we are facing in Nigeria will certainly continue to impact also on the industry. So if they come from a value innovation point of view and support this youth that have very innovative mindset and support them with investment to see how the agri-value chain, production, value addition, packaging, export, people can come in and play. And then from sensitization point of view, with regards to government, to open up those conversations, to open up these vistas for people to know that agriculture is not just about going to the farm to produce the plants or to produce or to rear animals. There is a lot within the value chain that people can plug onto, create wealth, make wealth, and have impact on the socio-economic well-being of Nigerians. Like I was saying, it's not just about food. We talk about medicine. We talk about raw material for the critical sectors, to produce. So there is need for a lot of education, sensitization, but importantly, support from government and from financial institutions. Of course, the government has to be the one to trigger that, to catalyze the financial institution to support by bringing policies that will ensure that as part of our national policy, the financial institution support our youth or any other person for that matter that would like to go to. Let us encourage people to go to agriculture, not by this transactional where some political leaders or political class will hijack it. And at the end of the day, people will not, that are supposed to benefit, don't benefit. And the overall impact of the economy can be seen.
All right. Quickly, Dr. Yeleye, as we wrap this conversation up, I want you to speak to the matter of storage. Earlier, you mentioned wastage, and we have seen that a lot of the times. How do we also address this aspect? Because it's very important.
Okay, to address the issue of storage, we have to approach it from a number of angles. First and foremost, we need to, there are some of the agricultural produce that we actually need to use storage system like cold storage, and that would depend a lot on electricity. Clearly, we will not be talking so much about our conventional electricity sources. Now we should be thinking about using renewable energy like solar power and stuff like that, and there are some modular systems that can do that depending on the scale and the size of such a enterprise. That is one. Then we should be talking seriously about emphasis on agricultural processing to be able to increase the shelf life of what has been processed. And that actually is one of the areas that we should lay a lot of emphasis on. But so much still depends on the enabling environment, at the national level, which I think will actually trickle down to individual, entrepreneurs level, and then of course we would. I think that those are the kinds of things we should be talking about now. So,
all right.
Okay.
Our time is up, unfortunately. But a lot has been said. I want to believe. We must thank you, Agricultural Policy Analyst, Dr. Olukayode Oyeleye, for your time, as well as from our Abuja studio, Strategist, Policy Analyst, Group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf. Thank you as well for your time on the program. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.